record to this. All right, so I am here today with Phil Greenfield. Hi.
Hello. Hiya, Philippe. Thank you for having me on.
Anytime. So we have a little cool things here. It's like 8 a.m. in California, and it's 4 p.m. if I recall in East England.
Yeah, Ireland.
Yeah. So I'm gonna spend a little bit of time introducing you, Phil. So Phil, you graduated from McTimoney Chiropractic School of Oxford, UK in 1992. Since then, you have been in a private practice in the UK. You moved to Dublin in September 2021 and are a member of the McTimoney Chiropractic Association of Ireland. You wrote a book that was published in 2009 called Unraveling, Letting Go, Getting Well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. You also contribute in Facebook group called Exploring Pain, Research and Meaning. And I recommend people to follow this group. And we'll talk about also see if there's other groups that you like. Also, you've done kettlebell for 3 years, if I recall correctly. And you're about to take on for a trip to Porto. And you find yourself in the lifting for Team England at the Kettlebell Sports World Championship in a few days. Yeah. So you have also a great interest in science and the words, the aspect of the word in science to the precision of the word in science, but also have an interest for martial art and kind of like that mystical aspect of it. And I think it goes back to the first question, as I'm going to talk about zero balancing in just a moment.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for joining me today, Phil. And I'm really excited because you have a way to express yourself in a very lengthy post on Facebook, a long format, and that helps develop the thought. So I want to spend some time because the conversation style is a little better suited, I think, today to go more in depth in 3 aspects. The first one I want to talk about is zero balancing. Yes. So we talked about this, and I want to see if we can square our approach on this, because it can benefit some people who are struggling with pain and discomfort. Sometimes that can be caused, for example, by fatigue or the posture, which is, it's almost a nasty word that has a bad rep in some of the science field. But I want to hear a little bit what you think about zero balancing and posture, in a sense, in your approach and how you see it.
Yeah, okay. When I graduated from the McTimoney College in 1992, there was a continuing education day the year after that was being run by a zero balancing practitioner. And I turned up on that day and there was nobody in the room, and she was setting up a table at the front. So as you do, you go to the front and say, "Can I be the body?" And so she gave a lovely talk on zero balancing. She was an acupuncturist, came from Birmingham in the UK. Her name was Holly Timmermans. Lovely presentation. And then she gave me a zero balancing session where I lay on my back on the table for about 20 minutes. And she worked very gently on me. Didn't really say much while she was working. And I kind of didn't really feel much during the session. But when I actually got off the table, I felt completely transformed. And so basically this set up a question in my mind. It's like, what had happened in that 20 minutes that allowed me to feel so different? And I think, this is a big component often of working with people one-to-one, that if they actually, come in the room feeling one way and they go out feeling another way, and it's a very different way of feeling, it actually sets up that kind of inner inquiry for them. It's like, why do I feel so different? How can I feel more different more often? So I think that experiential bit of any sort of body work particularly is really useful. So, being intrigued, I took a course and I loved it. And then that year, Fritz Smith, who was the originator of zero balancing, who lives in Borrego Springs, which is not so far from you, as we mentioned the other night, he was coming over that year to do a basic zero balancing course, which he'd not done for many years. And so I got the chance to hear the material from the horse's mouth, as it were, and absolutely fell in love with it. you know, hook, line and sinker. And I did probably 2 courses a year for the next 5 or 6 years. I did certification, which I ended in 97. And then I did the teacher training that I did in America, spend a fair bit of time with Fritz. And I, you know, I always look back on it with huge fondness because the community around zero balancing is just fabulous. You know, and Fritz himself, you know, he's 93 now and he's still going strong, which is a kind of a testament to his work, I hope. He's just the most delightful man I've ever met, you know, and a great teacher and a great mentor. So he developed it over a period of years. He was the son of a chiropractor, but he trained to be an osteopath. And then he took a medical degree. So he was one of those medical osteopaths as you have in the States, I believe. But then he had an experience with acupuncture that, in his own words, he said it kind of blew his mind. And so he came over to England to study acupuncture with J.R. Worsley in Leamington at the acupuncture college there. And so he, you know, he kind of said he had these 2 worlds of understanding health, the world of that was based on structure, you know, which very much came from his osteopathic and his medical training. And as he described it, the world of energy, you know, which is the acupuncture model. And I'm sure that the word energy isn't at all a good translation for what the Chinese, you know, medical people talk about as qi. But the nice thing about Fritz is that he used these really simple metaphors that really conveyed a lot of information in a very small space, which was one of his great gifts. So he said, well, if we have, you know, kind of 2 bodies, we have a body of energy and we have a body of structure. Somehow those 2 must meet. And he used this very simple metaphor of a sailing boat. So you have a sailing boat on the water, you have to sail, and you've got the energy of the wind and the structure of the sail. And if the sail is tacked into the wind beautifully, then you get this exhilarating ride through the water. And that was his basic kind of tenet for zero balancing, that if what he called energy and the structure of the body were tied in sufficiently in an organized way, the person's experience in their body would be one of vitality, you know, of vibrancy and of exhilaration. So that was the basis of it. And if you actually read about zero balancing on the internet or in other sources, you'll see a whole narrative around it that kind of spun into a more esoteric place that eventually I didn't find fitted well with where I was going in my own mind. So explanations aside, zero balancing itself is the most beautiful, gentle, and for me, transformative bodywork system. And again, it's like I'm trying to answer that question for myself. It's like, well, what does it actually do? You know, what did it do to me on that day that made me feel so different? And I think this is where I really started to fall in love with the skeleton. Because the focus of zero balancing touch is trying to contact bone. You know, it's not a soft tissue approach. The touch that we use is very much attempting to contact the person's skeleton and to support it and to hold it still for a very short period of time and then to release it. And it's basically a set of what we call fulcrums, which are done throughout this 20-minute session, which are lifts, pulls, torsions, stretches, but they're all held in stillness. And I think there's a kind of a magic in stillness, you know, that when the whole thing goes into stillness, the person gets a chance to feel themselves on quite a significant level.
I agree, yeah.
So all I can say when I got off that table that day is that because Holly had been touching, you know, attempting to make me aware of my skeleton through her touch, when I got off the table, I could really feel it. I felt supported, I felt grounded, and I felt expanded, and I felt solid, and I felt light, all at the same time. And it was just delightful. So that's a long answer to a small question, but
that's why I like that format, because really here you can express in detail how you feel. And when I hear what you just expressed here in those concepts, and we talked a little bit, I've followed you when you talk about being in your skeletal system, and I've heard it also in other format. I think it was the Alexander or the Feldenkrais. They really try to bring it back to the skeletal system as a system that people should pay attention to. And I'm really interested in how you express your view on that, because I've been expressing it to some of my clients differently. Like
Okay.
the way I say it, and it's not like a miracle knowledge that I came across. It's like listening to all those techniques or to those principles that I've discovered lately. Well, in the past 7 years, there's a lot of biomechanical aspect that I think maybe, like, I agree with you. The explanation might be a little far-fetched or
Yeah.
out of my comfort zone or out of my the way I look at it. But
Yeah.
in essence, for people who come see me, I will tell them, like, you're leaning on your toes. You look like you might fatigue yourself for no necessary reason. Like, how
Yeah.
about you try to stand in your skeletal system and see if
Yeah.
you can find some rest and recovery. So
Absolutely.
I like how you approached it, because that the term inner inquiry and the term that space, holding that space, is not something I thought about. And I really like that you mentioned that. It almost sounds like in a Middle Eastern culture, they said the silence is as important in the conversation as than the words. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
I want to shift gear a little bit from the zero balancing and that staying in the skeletal system to
Yeah.
pain and workout, because I know you will be familiar with both, but also integrate a little bit your knowledge of zero balancing,
Yeah.
other personal knowledge on that.
Yeah.
And what are some of the best principles that you found in your exploration of pain and in your practice as you're a professional, so you do have a practice as a professional, but you're also practicing kettlebell, which is
Yeah.
a bridge between practicing and helping people, but also practicing within to get the best sensation out of your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing for me, because as much as we are offering interventions for people who come along who have problems, I've always considered the work, ever since I started practice, I always thought it was more about education than it was about intervention.
Mm.
That we're hopefully offering people things that they can do which will help them over the long term. And so, the question to me has always been, well, what do I practice?
Mm.
What do I practice on a day by day level, on an hour by hour level, on a moment by moment level? What do I practice that is going to serve me the best?
Mm.
Because they're the kind of things I want to offer to people who come for help. And I want them to be simple, and I want them to be understandable, and I don't want them to be restrictive, and I want them to be based on principles rather than dogma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where, coming back to the skeletal support issue, I found that I was exploring in zero balancing really fed back into my experience of martial arts, and particularly the Chinese internal martial arts. Because when I was young, I did Aikido and karate, which was very much like crash bang wallop stuff. But a lot of my friends were picking up injuries. I was picking up some injuries, and I came across a teacher who was a teacher of Baguazhang, which is one of the internal Chinese martial arts. So there's Tai Chi, Xingyi, Baguazhang. These are the triad of internal Chinese martial arts. And all of them have this fundamental basic practice at the base, which is called Zhanzhuang, which is basically standing practice. Oh. So when you stand for a long period of time, you learn a lot. Basically, you learn where you're expending energy, where you don't need to be expending energy.
Yeah.
So if you were to stand on your 2 feet and stand still for half an hour, you would find that there will be an awful lot of adjustment going on as you started to go into discomfort and things started to shake, and then you'd find a bit of, and then eventually you start to find somewhere that's kind of in the middle. It's neither left nor right nor front, as you were saying about being on your toes or on your heels. In the middle, there is a place of rest. And that place of rest is defined by the very best line through the skeletal system. I mean, obviously the skeleton doesn't support the weight of the body fully, because we're supported on the soft tissues, on the organ column in the abdomen, but the skeleton kind of is the guide. And the point of Zhanzhuang practice was to make you aware of the skeleton as a supportive and guiding structure. So once you can do that when you're standing still, then you can start to take it into movement. And so in the end, whatever you do with your body, you're actually doing it in the most energy efficient way. Because when we talk about energy being expended, what is it that expends energy apart from the nervous system and the metabolic processes? Muscle contraction. So if we're actually experiencing that feeling of skeletal support, that place in the middle, we're recruiting the minimum amount of muscles necessary to get the job done. And that's the same whether it's standing, sitting, walking, running, whatever. Kettlebell lifting. Because when you start holding a 20 kilogram kettlebell above your head for any length of time, you really need to get that line. Because if you don't get that line, you will burn up very, very quickly. And this for me is why kettlebell sport is so beautiful. Because of the kettlebell sport rather than the hard style strength and endurance training, because basically you're trying to do a lift for a certain number of minutes, which may be 10 or 30 or 60. And it's like, if you're going to do that, you need to be efficient, because if you're not efficient, you will fatigue very quickly. So it's almost like kettlebell lifting is accelerated Zhang Zhuang practice for me. That's what got me in. But going to the clinical aspect of it, that kind of skeletal support is what I'm helping people, if they wish to engage with it, to become aware of. Because for me, that's what I practice, and I practice it all the time.
And it's very it's really hitting home what you're saying, and especially the aspect, almost like that personal research of feeling, what can I teach to people that makes sense to me, but that I can experience? Because if I don't experience it, maybe it's just like spitting out words or a book. But you really go as a person who yourself experience pain and discomfort and try to find what's the best way to stay active. And I personally, I'm struggling a bit on how to tell my client, like, should you go into health or should you go into fitness? Some people say like, well, I've never done anything and I want to have a six-pack. I was like, well, let's talk.
Long-term project.
And I really like the fact that you come from the place of your experience. You've matured your you've matured your thought process on it, but you made it personal so that it can be relatable, and you can share that with people on the basis of the experience and the knowledge, not just one or the other. So it's really, really cool. And that the concept of efficient is not a concept I see often when people talk about fitness. It's usually the opposite. How can I go really hard? I need to feel the soreness after. I was like, really? Do you? And no one thinks about being in fitness with efficiency. And it's really what I was intrigued when you talked to me about Maria, right? Am I saying the name right?
Yeah.
That's the message that she passed on to you. So would you mind like telling me a bit that story when she explained to you how she got where she got?
I mean, Maria is my partner. I met her in 2016 when I came over to do a workshop in Dublin, which was about skeletal support, interestingly, and she was on it, and it was at a gym where she trained, and she did all sorts of stuff. I mean, she's a marathon runner and she's a long distance cyclist, very fit woman. But she got into kettlebells about 5 or 6 years earlier, and she just found that she had a very natural aptitude for it. And ended up, going to world championships and getting world records, and it kind of surprised even her. And it still does to this day, and I'm sure she'll be bagging some more in Porto in a couple of weeks. But she's very light, she's only like 57 kilos, and she was hoofing these massive weights above her head, for 5 or 10 minutes. And if you're that light, if you haven't got that kind of muscle mass that some of the big guys have, you've got to be doing good technique. It has to be good technique, because you can't muscle it through, because you just haven't, I mean, women and men are of different muscle mass, but Maria is very light. And when I saw what she was doing, I'm going like, how do you do that? And she said, well, it's basically what you've been talking about in the workshop. It's basically just finding the skeleton, and actually when the bell is over your head, you're resting, you're letting the weight of the bell come through your body and through the skeleton. And so basically it weighs less than it does if you're holding it out here. So she found very innately a way of actually working with these heavy weights, which was very much the same as how I was working with the skeletal support in my martial arts. So again, they tied together like that. So yeah, I'm still trying to keep up with her, though, I have to say.
Well, you're still going to a world championship, so I think keeping up is not too bad. You did a great job. Yeah. And so I want to segue a little bit about like going deeper into the pain conversation, not hurting you, but what the benefit to people in pain and the behind the scene. I see you online, you grill people, you kind of question them, and you take them to task by asking specific question to specific problem with candor. Though you are gentle in your way. What is the question that you've asked that make you change you the most?
The question that's asked of me.
Yeah. So I know you like.
Yeah, well, I know exactly
people's mind.
I know exactly when it was, and I know exactly where I was at the moment that happened. I was walking the dog out on the fields near where I lived in Derbyshire, and I was on the phone. I'd just come across the pain signs forum, and I was like fascinated by it because I could see there was a lot of stuff going on, and I made a comment about chi. About the Chinese concept of qi as energy. And a guy called Andrew Cha, who you may have come across, from Hawaii, who is a master logician, I have to say. And I've got a huge amount of respect for him. I blocked him in the end because he just pissed me off so much. And I told him that I did that, and he was really happy. Because I couldn't, I said to him, I need to be out on my own figuring this stuff. I can't have you correcting me at every turn. So we parted company, but I thank him because basically he just took me to task in the way that I sometimes do, and said, he basically said, account for yourself, account for yourself and what you are saying. And I couldn't. And my world did that, and this was like, I was brought up very much with a scientific upbringing because my dad was a scientist. I loved the esoteric stuff. I immersed myself in martial arts and Buddhism and meditation when I was about 16. So I had these parallel tracks going on all the way through my life. And I think when I was in the midst of my zero balancing days, I'd fallen heavily into a lot of esoteric stuff, and I kind of got burnt. I lived in a Buddhist community for a couple of years and I had a really bad experience. And this is when I realized that I'd kind of been duped. And I'd been duped because the explanations that these people were using for what was going on were completely unfalsifiable. It's like you couldn't prove them one way or the other. So they were able to manipulate people in a way, it was like cult behavior. And it was an awful experience, but it taught me an enormous amount. But it got me really interested in the accuracy of explanations and how we should tease these things apart, because we have a responsibility to vulnerable people who come to us, whether you're a body worker or whether you're a Buddhist teacher or a religious minister or whatever, we have a responsibility to offer people the best language to explain what it is that we're seeing. And so I think when Andrew challenged me, I just realized that my hippie days were over. I needed to get back to some science, and I needed to get back to looking at the way I was taught, because I was, using this language with patients and clients. And I've always had a good heart, I think. And I think I've always been careful with my language, but some of the concepts I used, I don't think were very helpful, and that's really what set me out on the inquiry around narratives. And what got me involved in, being so involved on that forum. And I don't actually go on many others because that place I find is it's a good group. There was a time when it was a difficult group, but I think it's a good group now. And I think if people have patience and if people ask the right questions and people are open to criticism, like I was, because I'm coming at it from somebody who got clobbered by Andrew Cha, and it's like, that was hard, that was difficult. And so, I kind of crossed the chasm, as Jason Silvernail said. and it's been a great journey. And I was very lost for a long time, but I feel like I'm starting to get myself together again now and find a narrative that I think is much more balanced.
You sound like you described cognitive dissonance like to a T. And for people who are not aware of that concept, is when you have two belief systems and they clash and your brain is just exploding, and it's very stressful and unsettling. And some people don't go into, oh yeah, maybe I'm thinking something stupid. They go into, no, you're wrong, and they walk out and they keep their belief system that don't connect, but they're happy with. And crossing that chasm to some extent is kind of that, is taking almost, and I know it's a religious term, but a leap of faith that we can be wrong, and being humble and account a bit more often than not on what we say. And I feel you, Andrew was pretty doing a great job at torturing. But it's really difficult, and we see that. I see that, you probably see it too, when you have patient coming to you, or for me, client coming to me, and they say something, and it's difficult to not go there and tell them, well, right off the bat, we have no relationship, but you're wrong. So I have really to create that space, welcome the belief system, welcome what they say, maybe I can learn from their approach, and then I create a discussion. Did you see that also happen in your practice?
Yeah, I think so. And if it, if we are so worlds apart, if you like, I mean, sometimes it's not going to be a place where we can lean in. So I always think it's important to, be aware that there are some relationships that may not bear fruit, if you like. But if we clear out some of the head stuff, we come back to that question of like, well, what do I practice?
Yeah.
What am I going to offer this person that they can not have to think about, but that they can feel? So I think the whole thinking feeling axis is really important. Some people love the whole, cognitive aspect of understanding what's going on. But, for some people, it's just completely irrelevant. And what they seem to benefit from is something that they can actually experience in a somatic way. It's like you were saying, it's like, okay, stand on your heels. How's that feel? Okay, put your weight forward into your toes. How's that feel? Okay, let's come back to the middle. How's that feel? How's that feel? It's like, well, yeah, they all feel different. So if you've got different things you can explore, then you can explore them. And the exploration is yours, and it's not imposed from the outside. And what I would hope to do is to encourage people into exploration, of movement, of weight bearing, of emotional response, of the cognitive stuff as well, because all these worlds, all these aspects of who we are, they can all either be in the middle and dynamic, or a bit stuck on the one side. And this is, what I was interested in when I wrote the book, because it was something that I'd struggled with. It's like I had massive crises when I was in my teens and 20s, and it's like back in the day, it's like there wasn't much around to help. It was all very brand new. And you listen to the news now, and you listen to kids talking about mental health, and you're like, we've made a breakthrough. We're actually in a different world now. And I wish that language was around when I was young. But on the other hand, it wouldn't have taken me on the journey that it has done. So happy days.
And the journey you took on might have influenced that place where we are here. I want to share something I read about your book that was hilarious for me, but very insightful. The moment of insight you had on writing your book was that question: what would be the definitive method which will guarantee miserable life full of dreadful relationship accompanied by body pain, poor health, and unhappiness? And it's very unusual yet awesome beginning to a book on a self-help of sorts. I thought that was brilliant. It's like you didn't ask yourself, how can I feel the best? It's like, what can I really do to mess it up?
Well, it was kind of obvious to me that it's like, if you flip it on its head, it's like, work out how to break things. Work out how to ruin things, work out how to completely demolish all the things that you value, and just stop doing them, or do the opposite. So I don't know whether it's because I used to love astrology. I still love astrology. You know, it's like I remember doing my own chart by hand when I was about 13 years old. I mean, God knows whether I used to have to go down the library to get all the books with all the figures in. But I was so interested in this idea of correspondences, you know, and how you could look at things symbolically and how you could have simple metaphors to actually explain complicated things. You know, that was the stuff that really interested me. And I think being a Gemini, it's like, I like these things that work in twos, you know. So the whole thing's like, how do you break it? Okay, don't do that, do that. That'll fix it. So it was just flipping it upside down, really. But I had a lot of fun with that.
And I hear you with, thank you for the appetizer on the book. That was a great insight here. Like, I really like the idea of the metaphor. Like, for example, the metaphor of the phoenix is very, you tell the metaphor of the phoenix to people that totally get it. Oh yeah, you burn, go to ashes and get reborn. And that is this metaphor of the phoenix. It's forwards, and people understand the whole story behind it. And I think there's a great power to those into explanation when we try to get people back into an experience and a feeling. So it's a very interesting journey that you've been on, and I'm really grateful for you sharing that. Like, I definitely have more questions coming out of that, so we can do another part where we discuss some of the aspects. And I know we're gonna already spend a hot minute discussing on Facebook as well. So
Yeah, right.
if you had something that you would like to finish on that you think helped the most people that you've worked on that were experiencing pain, would you care to share that?
Yeah, I think, you know, because I'm interested in the basic principles that underpin things, you know, like the roots of the tree rather than all the branches and the flowers. You know, I always think if the roots are healthy, then the flowers and the fruit will look after themselves. And that really comes, you know, I mean, none of this is new. It's like I inherited it from all the teachers I've had, and it's a very fundamental thing in Chinese martial arts. You know, that you look after the yin aspect, the more solid, the more still, the more, you know, the nourishing aspect of things, and all the creativity, the yang grows out of that. So for me, it's like, yeah, what do we practice? What do we practice? And making it very binary again, you know, with these two things. In any moment, I'm either lifting or I'm sinking. I can't be doing both. So here's me lifting, here's me sinking. See the difference? No, because it's tiny. You know, there's a tiny opportunity in every moment to let go. And it's something you can feel. It's not something intellectual, you know. And this is why, you know, my holy trinity is breath, bones, and gravity.
Yeah.
You know, allow gravity, let gravity do its work. Let go into the support of your skeleton, and then let the breath ride on that, because that gives you that platform of relaxation, which I think is a fundamental to wellness. You know, and I'll always be convinced of that, even if the studies have not yet been completed. I will always hold dear in my heart the idea that, you know, what are we doing as therapists? What are we doing with teachers? We're promoting relaxation on every level, and we do that best by allying ourselves with gravity and letting the skeleton take the weight.
I love it. I gain a lot from it, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from it. So thank you. And I'm gonna keep that Trinity, and I'm gonna write it down below on the description, because I love it. It's a very simple, powerful little mantra that people can repeat. Like, yeah. And I see you repeating it often online, and I think you should keep on repeating it, because it's simple. It goes to the core, and yet it's exactly what you talk about, that experience of feel. It really rests in the essence of a huge part we are as human, where we don't stay enough. We're like in our head. So thank you so much for sharing this. stay. I'm gonna turn off the recording, but stay online with me. And for people who loved it, look at the comment below. I'm gonna put the link on the book, the information to find you, which are sparse, but there are there are some. And I hope people enjoy that. And I will rewrite the Trinity at the bottom too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Philippe.
You're very welcome.